but he started with the city in 2014 as a mechanic. 2018, he moved over to the Parks Department as an assistant superintendent, and then recently, 2025, he was promoted to our park superintendent, which he's still filling that role. At the beginning of 2025 is when he started taking this Emerging Leaders Academy, and he is, from what I'm gathering from him, he has taken it and he has ran with it, all of the things that he has learned in that program, and he's really, we're seeing a different side of Greg as far as his leadership. So I'm super excited to see that and everything that he's going to bring to the table moving forward. So, yeah, just wanted to make sure that he was recognized for his accomplishments.
Good. Thank you, Greg. And did you have anything you want to say?
I just want to say thank you to the city of Ottawa for this opportunity. It was really good and very appreciative. And I hope that some of my other coworkers in the future are able to embark on the same journey. So.
Yeah, we'll get a picture. I don't have anything to hand you.
So,
Thank you.
Yeah, very good. Yes.
I just wanted to say thanks to the city for seeing the value in doing these professional development courses, as well as to Greg for being willing to take that and develop himself personally as well. So
How many have we to go through that course? Anybody know? We've had several.
At this point, 5 or 6.
Okay.
Yeah, 5 or 6 have went through the Emerging Leaders Academy, and then we've had 4 go through the Certified Public Management.
Okay.
So that'll be the next step that we're hoping that Greg decides that he wants to do that at some point in the future. It's a little bit larger of a task, but I feel like that it'll benefit him greatly. So we're looking forward to that.
And others.
yeah. Thank you, Greg.
Thanks. Thank you. That's great.
We will go on to our consent agenda, which includes minutes from the July 9th, 2025 meeting, as well as appointment of city manager Silgat to the Kansas Municipal Gas Agency Board of Directors for a 2-year term, as well as the agenda approval. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Do we have a second? Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. At this time, I'd like to give commissioners a chance to declare any conflict or communication they've had that might influence their ability to consider today's issues impartially. Seeing none, we will skip over item 10 with nothing under that item. We'll start with new business, item 11A.
Resolution making determinations as to the need for housing within the city of Ottawa and defining a proposed reinvestment housing incentive district, Woodridge Estates.
This resolution makes findings regarding the need for housing within the city and includes the legal description for the proposed RHID district, and we have Director Landis presenting.
Thank you. I'm also going to invite Kevin Cowan with Gilmore and Bell to help me with this discussion item or this presentation. It's a resolution. This is one of the first steps really that you make as a governing body in establishing a reinvestment housing incentive district. And so the project that's being brought to you is for Woodridge Estates, and we have some basic information, and then I'll ask Kevin to kind of go through the process and the timeline and where this fits into the remainder of the process for you. The project background is that this is 13 single-family homes to be located what is currently at 1001 East Wilson Street. It's right at the corner of Wilson and Milner. And this single-family home development, it has not made it all the way through the final platting process yet. So what you see right now is just the entire area. So we don't have the actual final plat and what that might look like. It hasn't finished that process yet, but this is a generic outline, I guess, of where it will sit. The project description is that the eligibility for an RHID, the 2 of the 3 items that qualify you for an RHID overall is that you have to have, if you have infrastructure costs, that could be water, sewer, streets, electric, any of those extensions of infrastructure, and or if the utilities have been in for more than 10 years, it could also include vertical construction. In this area, this project specifically, there is infrastructure around the site, but a lot of the cost for the project itself are bringing those pieces of infrastructure into the project site, as well as some of the other costs of just developing the project itself. It's not necessarily focused on the vertical construction of the homes. The homes that are proposed, there are 3 to 4 of each style that are as part of the initial plan, ranging anywhere from 1,064 square feet to 1,400 square feet per home. And the average market price estimated right now is anywhere between 212,000 and 265,000. The project history is fairly limited here as far as the planning side. It just got started in the spring of this year. It's when we started having our initial discussions for the incentive to go along with the housing development. So they are in the process currently of the preliminary plat and the final plat, and that process is ongoing. And then this is where I'll ask Kevin to jump in as to where we are in the process here. So we did have about 4 analysis conducted by Baker Tilly, and that was produced, and then we shared those results and the discussion with our economic incentive review committee, and that consists of the school district, the county, our FCDC representative, and then some people from the city side as well, to sit down and really take a good look at what is the project, what is the recommendation for, or what could the recommendation be for an incentive. We reviewed in detail what the but-for analysis had included in it, and the feasibility study is yet to be done. That's later in the process. It'll actually come next in the process. And so we're at this really first key point that comes to you. And so this is the resolution. And Kevin, do you want to talk a little bit about what we're doing here?
Sure. Nice to be here this morning. This is required by statute. And as Melanie said, it's sort of a first step. When you go through this process and you have had a housing needs analysis completed, and when you consider all of those things, and again, you've had a but-for analysis, if it appears that you have an area that you want to incentivize and qualify, the first step under the statute is for you to adopt this resolution, which includes the legal description and a map, so indicating location, publish it. And then once it's been published, this resolution goes to the Department of Commerce with a request that the Department of Commerce agree, consent, find that, yes, this is an area that qualifies under RHID and can be incentivized. So this resolution will kick off a number of things, the things I just described and is shown on the graphic. Once Commerce approves, which can be quickly, can sometimes take a few weeks, but assuming it's relatively quickly, in the meantime, the city staff, developer will be working on the plan itself. So the next step after Commerce took its action would be for the city to have presented to it a plan for the development and approve the plan. So that would be on August 20th for actual action. So you'd have another resolution that says we've been presented a plan and we want to continue to consider it. To do that, we have to call for a hearing. And then once you have the hearing, you can pass an ordinance that actually establishes the plan. So between now and August 20th, there will be a flurry of activity. The but-for analysis is pretty close to a feasibility analysis that's required by statute. So we're a little bit ahead of the game there. But again, that plan that you'll be presented will contain a lot of what Melanie just described. This is where it is. These are the units. These are the values. The feasibility will contemplate when those units are done. And so adding to tax value and when would they be creating the increment. So all of that would be in the plan that you would get to see prior to August 20th. And then if acceptable, intent resolution to call for the hearing. And I'll add, I sat in on the committee hearing this week and it was really, really good. And it's great that you involved the school district and the county so early in the process, because as you can see in the graphic at the bottom, they do, much like tax increment finance, have something of a veto right if they make an adverse finding. And so by involving them, you're going to know where they stand on a project much earlier than, oh my gosh, we did all of this and then we're in the middle of that protest period and we find out unexpectedly that, the county's gonna make a finding or something like that. So that's it. Again, pretty simple, short step today, but will lead to a number of things coming up.
We ever had the Commerce Department turn it down or any, or they have ways you can do it if we do this or any conditions?
No,
Pretty-
I mean, I can't promise you that that's not going to happen.
First time.
Yeah, I mean, I just had a conversation with somebody that was doing a but-for analysis in another city where it was for single-family housing, but literally across the street, other single-family housing was being constructed without incentives, and you may get to a place where that's, maybe the local jurisdiction, city isn't interested, or county or school district, but maybe you'll get to a place where commerce says, well, this doesn't make any sense because you've added this number of units right across the street without incentivizing it, but to date, they have been pretty agreeable. I think they understand almost all new housing is good new housing these days, that everybody has needs of one category or another, so haven't seen it, can't promise it won't happen.
And one of the requirements is that the housing study accompanies this
Right.
resolution, what's given to them. And that was just updated early this year, so
Yeah.
those are all still relevant numbers and probably gives them the next level set of confidence that they need for moving.
Any other questions?
Madam Mayor, I will abstain from this vote due to the fact that Legacy Homes has hired me before on projects. So I don't want any kind of optics out there that maybe I'm voting for it to benefit myself.
Madam Mayor, I'll make the motion to approve item 11A on the agenda.
Do we have a second?
Second, yeah.
Any further discussion?
I just want to say about the housing study, it served two purposes, really, to tell with what we need, but also useful in getting this kind of a deal passed. So,
Yeah.
It's that was a good investment money we put into that, so it's good.
May I have roll call vote, please?
How do you vote, Mayor Pro Tem Clayton?
Yes.
Commissioner Skidmore?
Yes.
Commissioner Taylor is absent. Commissioner Crowley is abstaining. Mayor Allen?
Yes. Motion carries. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
We will next move on to item 11B.
2026 Budget Review General Fund.
City staff will present the proposed 2026 general fund budget. We have Director Landis and with support from City Manager Stolkach.
That's a big stack. Thank you.
All right, thank you. So, excuse me, I should have put in here in this slide presentation, where we've been so far with this process. And I think that's really important that we remember as we move into each one of these last few discussions. We really are nearing the end. Although I know it feels like we've been at this forever, and we really have done a lot. So we've had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 discussions so far, or 6 discussions so far prior to today regarding budget. And all of those centered around all 4 of the utilities, the special revenue funds. We've met with the community partners. You've heard from them. You've discussed how we could accomplish some funding for them. We then reviewed all of our mill levy impacted funds at our last meeting. And today we have 2 sets of presentations for you, I guess, if you will. One being the general fund, which we haven't covered yet, and the items that we have to accomplish today, which is the determining whether we're going to exceed the R&R and set the public hearing date. So this part of our discussion today is just about the general fund, and just as some general background, there is a lot of information in the packet materials. So if you are looking for all of the detail, it was in the packet, accompanying each one of those is a narrative page for each division. And I will note for you that somehow some of the headers for some of the divisions became obsolete as throughout the packet, but not all of them. Some of them are there. So really, if you read the description of service, you can tell which division that is for, and it really describes what the division does, what they're trying to accomplish, some of their goals, and how different types of activities impact the funding for that division. So for example, if some of their salaries are split, or if there's a particular project that they are targeting to get accomplished, or if they just have some background materials that really helps you to understand what that budget is put together surrounding. All of those line item details and all of those narratives, and all of that work were done by each of your department divisions. And I can't even say it's just the department heads. They each have a lot of staff that work really hard to put together all of those budget line items. And then we have multiple discussions in-house, and we even have to get back to them and ask them to basically sharpen their pencil and come back to us with even some cuts before we presented any of this to you. So just to give you a little bit of background of as to how the general fund was put together. Within the packet and the materials, there's a little bit of discussion about the revenue sources for the general fund. So I think it's important to remember that we really have three of the largest revenue sources within the general fund itself is ad valorem taxes, sales taxes, and then everything else is really combined together. That includes like franchise fees and service and charges for services. The ad valorem tax itself is about 33% of the total revenues for the fund. What's been presented to you in the previous meeting when we talked about what the mill rate could be for this year, keeping it a level mill rate, it would bring in $4,924,000 for ad valorem tax to support the general fund. Additionally, 45% of your total revenue is based on sales tax. And in the sales tax projections, we had for this year, we had maybe gone a little more on the aggressive side when we estimated sales tax for this year. And we'll have some trend graph to show you here and to talk a little bit more about what we've done with sales tax in those projections. But we really finished only 3.3% overall in 24 over 23. And so our projections are just under 2% overall. And then let me explain that a little differently. So we have 4 actual sales and use tax amounts that come into us. So we have city sales tax, city use tax, county sales tax, and county use tax. And each one of those perform differently. As you can imagine, it's just, it has to do with, in the city sales tax, of course, it's all of the businesses that are within the city limits. In county, it's everything throughout the county. And then in use tax, it's what comes in or what's delivered within the city and or the county. So each one of them perform a little differently. And I'll show you in a little more detail here on this slide.
Online sales.
Online sales, anything you have delivered here.
Okay.
If you go to register your vehicle and our sales tax rate is higher than where you paid for it, that the difference is paid here. There's a variety of things, everything you order online that is shipped to you, anything that basically you don't pick up in person is considered a use tax. So here's a little bit different look at it. The very top line is the city sales tax, and the second line is our county sales tax, and then the bottom two are city and county use tax. So as you can see, we're really flattening out. We came out of the COVID years, and we really had not seen a lot of decrease in our sales tax. In fact, we saw a fairly significant increase in our sales tax, where a lot of the surrounding cities were having difficulty, especially in the metro area, because most of their revenue is based on sales tax. And as people were not visiting restaurants and stores and those things, they were really having difficulty there. We are a little bit different. We saw our increases though in our use tax. So a lot more things delivered, maybe less shopping locally, which of course impacts your local businesses. And then you can see we started to kind of jump up there in the middle in 22 and 23. And even on the use tax, we still see that largely those revenue streams were still significantly higher in percentages. In the overall grand scheme of things, the use tax though is a much smaller number proportionate to your total sales tax that's brought in. So even though it might be an 11 or 15% increase in those years, the dollars are small enough that it doesn't have a significant impact. And your biggest impact is really on your sales tax, both from the city and county side. So I can tell you, we did on average this number, but we really budget or we really forecast them based on each one of them individually. And we've looked at, 5 years of change over year, change between, some seasonality. Even City Manager Silcott did some analysis to see if we could, be a little more aggressive or if we needed to scale back a little bit on our projections. So we really landed at just under 3% actually in our projections for 26. And we think we'll come out on the very conservative side, at least that in 25.
And just so people know, what's an example of just a regular county sales tax? What would be an example of that? Somebody buying something?
Somebody buying something at the gas station in Wellsville.
Okay.
In any restaurant or any place that has a sale in the county outside of the city limits of Ottawa, and then also within the city limits of Ottawa. So their county sales tax, when you pay a sales tax within the city, you have your city sales tax, your county sales tax, and then it's all incorporated into that total amount that's paid within the city. So then we get a portion, all cities within the county get a portion of the county sales tax. Okay. Just to summarize all of the expenditures that we have for all of the individual funds, or divisions within this fund, this really gives you a breakdown. Our law enforcement and fire services are a large chunk. Our personnel and employee benefits is a large chunk of our expenditures. And then every department, of course, many of them administrative in nature, some of them active functions such as streets and cemeteries, parks. They're all included in here. One of the newest additions for 25 is you'll see a new revenue and a new offsetting expenditure for the transient guest tax. And that new division is called Community Attraction and Tourism within the general fund. You'll see both an amount in there in 25 as the projected amount that could come in beginning in September through the end of December, and then an additional amount of what we're projecting for 2026. Really, amongst all of this, this is one of the items that plays a factor in here in increased expenditures. Our emergency communications 911 budget from the county. This information was in the packet for you. There's a memo or a letter from the county, as well as the spreadsheet that they use to calculate that budget. And the city has traditionally paid the 50% of the total budget that's presented to us. I don't actually know if this is I don't believe that this is their full budget. This is the portion that applies to our contribution. So our increase is 9% this year. Over last year, we do have a refund, a rebate or refunds that we get back from the county related to that budget annually. And that's only determined after their audit is complete, and it wasn't complete as of the last couple of weeks. And so I don't know what the actual reimbursement will be that comes back to us this year. That 52,000, if you're looking at a revenue line in the budget, you won't see it in 24. It actually didn't come in until the top of 25, but it is related to their 24 activity. And so our reimbursement for this year, for last year's activity has yet to be determined. They were not available this morning to be here, as you know, they're having their own meeting this morning and also discussing their own budget this morning, so. We can have them come to have a discussion with the commission anytime between now and the adoption of the budget if you wish.
Commissioner Spindler, did you have?
Yeah, I had quite the 9%, that's almost all in salaries, and so I just was wondering how they propose a 9% raise increase for their employees when we're about half that on average. I don't know if they have any defense for that, or they ever said anything to you, the reason for the 9%.
We did not discuss the letter came after the initial budget request, and just 1 minute, let me see if they mentioned it in their letter.
I didn't see it in the letter, but at least the covered letter that included benefits as well.
Yeah, I'm sure it does include benefits. And it's possible that their insurance, increase or any of those things, but we can certainly invite them to come and have that discussion. We have every year, it's just the timing didn't quite work out for today.
I was thinking of just on salaries, because I see we've got the benefits down here a little further.
About half of it
Okay.
is. I think the total increase is 114 and
Mhm.
salaries is just 67. The other is
And then benefits.
health
or-
insurance, capers, FICA, stuff like that.
Yeah. And then sometime too, and, I would just like to have a discussion with renegotiating our contract with them. Just for the record, I'd like to say that maybe after the first year. Attempted to do this last year and things didn't time out right. And other issues there involved, but nonetheless, I would like to, sometime we wouldn't talk about this again after the first year, but I'd like to renegotiate that contract. We have a contract with them and we can amend it. We have to give them 90-day notice. And for this size of a budget, and we really don't have any input into the numbers here. And we pretty much have to accept what they present to us, so just, for future discussion, I'll put it that way.
Well, I mean, I'd like to have a conversation with somebody, so if we could have somebody come to our one of our meetings, I think it'd be great, because there's also the conversation of, the Wellsville contribution, has it changed much, and if so, is it going up, how much, things like that. I know Wellsville's growing and certainly, fielding some more calls and things like that, so I'd like to see Wellsville carrying their weight also.
So we'll get someone here to kind of give our report and rundown. And we'll also revisit this, late fourth quarter, early, first quarter of 2026.
Appreciate that.
As an overall look at what was presented in the packet, this, we do have the 26 proposed column that does pair up with what you've been presented for the state budget form. We did begin the last 2 years, I believe, including one additional year, which is a projection year, just so you can kind of see what we, foresee in the future. The difficulty with that, of course, is that, there's a lot of moving factors. And so even when we go back to, say, the base that we had established for 26, there's a lot of things change over time. And so we did use that as a base when we prepared our proposed budget. And then we did, go back and look and see where some of those numbers changed a little bit. In the 27 column, quite a bit is different there. So you'll see that those expenditures jump up significantly. But there's also an increase in revenue, fairly significant increase in revenue. That's because, as we discussed last week about the golf course and bringing that into the general fund, we've included that in there, both on the revenue side and the expenditure side. And then we have that additional transient guest tax revenue that's coming in and the corresponding expenditure in that community attraction and tourism division. So overall, that's not an apples to apples comparison between those two columns. I just wanted to make sure that you knew kind of what was included in there.
And I have a question on that, for the general fund, what is the purpose of putting the golf course in the general fund versus having its own kind of fund or own budget, kind of how it's been done? I guess?
Yeah, great question. So we have transfer authority under state statute for a variety of things. One of the things that's fairly limited is just transferring money out of the general fund to recreational activities for operations. You can transfer it for the capital costs. You can make transfers for a variety of things. But when you have an operation that will, that needs a transfer in to basically subsidize that, or in the case of the OMA, we don't make the transfer because they are mill levy supported, separate mill levy support. If we were operating the aquatic center, you would want to include that under your general fund. So a lot of those operational type divisions traditionally would show up underneath of the general fund. The golf course fund was originally established separately because we were working through the purchase and we had transfers coming in to cover the costs up front. And so as we get more into the operations side, it just seems to make sense to bring it in under the general fund. Several years ago, lots of years ago, there was a really big push. There was a GASB that basically said you should include all of those divisional budgets underneath of your general fund if you can, and unless there was a dedicated revenue stream for it, or it was able to operate on its own. The airport is one of the other operations that sits out there. We make an annual transfer to the airport because the revenue does not cover the expenditures annually. So eventually, at some point, if we were to expand that, that would be another operation that could come in underneath of the general fund.
And I thought I'd join Director Landis. Since
Thank you.
I was kind of the driver for looking at consolidating this in, following that GASB recommendation, and also to help us as we go forward and you see some of these projections going forward, to free up additional funds so that we're maximizing the full use of dollars available that are general fund supported, either directly or indirectly. And we want to make sure too that we're being as efficient as possible, meaning if we have a golf course fund, we should have a standalone amount of money that needs to be setting aside in that fund's unencumbered fund balance. And this essentially frees up cash that could be used while we're growing and we're looking at everything on the horizon with respect to our new construction tax base that we hope will be growing here within the next 3 years. So this helps us be more efficient with the deployment of those dollars until we're actually able to start collecting some of the growth that will be forthcoming in that. So it allows us to provide more services, better services, and to do so without asking our current tax base to contribute any additional tax dollars, because that's something that will then be absorbed, albeit at, a smaller amount, but be absorbed back into the general fund for use.
Some of the other highlights that are in here is as mentioned, the community attraction programming, the community visioning and quality of life initiatives were included in your 25 expenditures. The continued funding transfer for community partners, and that community service fund. We do make an annual transfer for the airport, and that is largely supporting, it is larger for 25, because that is the grant match for the taxiway reconstruction project. We do make an annual transfer to the sidewalk capital fund, and then it funds the city facility maintenance, which if you recall from our couple of last conversations about the OMA and golf, we did transfer some of those regular maintenance costs back into the general fund as well. So those are included in 25. And then going forward, we also have, we'll talk a little bit more about this in our next item, but it does have a reduction in the overall property taxes that would be assigned to the general fund in an amount that's related to NRP rebates that we have in that program. And so there's a roughly $120,000 reduction that hits the general fund for NRP rebates. And then we did include an additional pay stipend for a firefighter paramedic position. and then continued the 50% participation in the 911 emergency communications budget. I want to note a couple of things that we did not include in here, and every year we ask our department heads to come back to us with a running list of those things that need to be funded. And when I say that they're needs, they're really, in all of the things that we receive year over year, there aren't any wants, they're really needs, and they're ways that they think that they can enhance services, or that they can, maybe it's just that our existing vehicle fleet needs replacement, that there's capital projects that need to be funded, all of those items. And so none of those things are included, that were brought to us as additional items for 26 are included in this budget. The dollars don't support anything really new. The included in there is some new positions for police, fire, and parks, the law enforcement range improvements, and then also adequate funding or more funding, necessary funding for vehicles and equipment replacement. There is a transfer in here to the an equipment reserve fund. It just won't be enough to do everything that's needed at this immediate moment. And so we'll just need to go through and prioritize what we're able to get done with those dollars that are in there. And with that, this is just a summary of what I just talked about. So with that, if you have questions about the general fund, we have all of our departments available. And if there are questions that we can't answer, we'll do a budget recap for you at one of the upcoming meetings. And as a reminder, today's discussion is really still just a discussion. We don't have to make any final determinations until we get towards the end of, it'll be the first meeting in September. We can have more budget discussions between now and then. The idea, though, would be that if you wanted to add anything to the general fund, we would need to know that today. It does impact the total mill rate that's been proposed to you. And when we have our next item of discussion, it will be for setting that public hearing and what that maximum mill levy will be. So with that, we are all available for questions.
A question that's not kind of specific to a department, back on more of the general fund, kind of for you and City Manager Silcott. There are other places I know who have kind of mill levies, like Johnson County has a parks mill levy that they specifically, have a mill levy set that goes to their parks department. And, thinking about us with potential aquatic center, golf course, obviously parks needing work, and larger things with restrooms at Kansas Park and some of these things that are higher dollar items. Are we potentially able to do that as a city by state statute, or how does that look if stuff like that was almost broke out to be its kind of own mill levy?
So there's a couple of ways I think that it can be done. Yeah, there are a couple of ways. So one way is that, you have a specific mill levy for the OMA, right? And that was put in place by charter ordinance, and there is a mill levy specific to that one operation. Some other cities, the way that they do it is, and I would imagine that's what you're talking about it for specifically.
By
Johnson
fund or by
County
policy,
Yeah.
the two ways.
It's okay.
Yeah, the other way is that you could just say, and we're going to increase that mill rate by 1 mil or half a mil or a quarter of a mil. And we want those dollars to be specifically used for parks. And that could be done in a variety of ways. And we could move, that money can be part of the revenue and expense that is allocated for parks operations. It could be for parks improvement, could go to the special parks fund for those capital improvements. So there's a variety of ways of doing that, if that's what you determine you want to do.
Does that essentially take away a little bit of flexibility when you define that mill is assigned to that you can't really transfer out to other departments, potentially, anything kind of like that? Like as budgets would fluctuate, you're kind of
If you're administering it within a fund, yes. If you're doing it by policy, you have a little more flexibility. And again, then you're able to kind of pool those unencumbered assets, because then if you're doing it by fund, and one of the things that rating agencies look at and that we try and account for so that we don't have to come back to budget adjustments and whatnot, is ensuring that we have sufficient cash carryover. And one of those things is they look at your kind of coverage ratios with respect to your fund balance and what you have for your operations within each of those funds. So what we want to try and do is, make sure that we are providing the services, and the approach that we've taken is to keep the tax rate, the mill levy, flat. In other words, if it's, 44, we're gonna keep it at 44. If it's 46, we're gonna keep it at 46. And then kind of work that tax base issue from there. And we put paying our people, including benefits for our people, being able to replace vacant positions that are currently slotted when they become vacant, so we're not freezing vacancies, et cetera. And then replacing vehicles and equipment that are at the end of their useful life. And then after that is when we look at program enhancements. And one of the things that, and we're still in the process of developing and trying to get, additional data points on is, what is it that we can do? And when we have, 186,000, I asked Director Landis when we were having discussions to see if we couldn't look at what are we abating for delayed gratification 10 years from now versus what are we adding? And we're also looking at doing some additional calculations and to try and better tell the story, but we're currently abating for NRP, $186,359 currently for 25. This year for 26 budget that you're seeing, and then our TIF abatements are at $287,247. And we're adding back to the property tax rolls, in other words, contributing. So those are the actual dollar amounts that aren't coming on that we've added and won't come on for, a period of 6 to 10 years. We're adding $4,126 to the tax rolls. And so, we're also looking at new construction, valuation, and what's that gap, and I won't steal her thunder, so I'll,
No, fine.
well, she'll have a slide that'll address this when we start discussing the revenue neutral rate. But ultimately, what we try and do with that, by not having it in a fund and by trying to address things via a policy, that enables us to try and be more tactical in where we spend and how we spend, so that we're not needlessly levying taxes upon ourselves and our neighbors.
And to your question about, if you wanted to assign that, and if you wanted to assign a certain amount of ad valorem tax within the existing mill rates, you would be taking away from some other service, essentially. We would have to go find the reduction in those expenditures or eat into that fund balance in order to do that. If you wanted to add that to the existing mill rate overall and say that that's what we want it to be used for, we would build that into the budget. So you would see that increase in revenue and ad valorem, and you would see the corresponding transfer to special parks or a corresponding expenditure in the parks budget, for as an example, or the streets budget, or whatever that is that you would want to do with those dollars.
Thank you.
Mr. Clayton, are you suggesting that what if the sales tax fails in November? Now we don't have a fund for recreation per se, is that?
Potentially that, but also even if sales tax still goes through, just to kind of really define where you can, I think obviously the general fund, there's a lot in it, and does that really help kind of clarify what is going towards potentially parks and recreation and activities, similar to how the OMA and library, we can see those mill rates broke out separately.
And in your divisions, you can see what those expenditures are for, say, parks and streets, but in the general fund, those are for operations. So that's where your personnel costs and your a lot of just your generic maintenance of the parks and streets happen. And your special highway and your special parks funds are really where those long-term capital improvements. And as we've discussed, we have a plan in both of them. But the dollars, and the amount of dollars that come into each of those funds each year are fairly small. So, at least not enough to accomplish all of the things that need to be done across the entire city. So, yeah, so this would be that would be one other way that you could supplement those is with an additional ad valorem.
And case in point, like, if we were levying for the OMA, we have a charter ordinance, it says we do 3 mills up to. So it says, you know, no more than, but we can do less than. We do 2 for operations and 1 for essentially the capital essentially capital reserve for, you know, maintenance upkeep on the facility, which we have transferred into the general fund and some of our equipment and capital items where we're allowed to by statute to allow that flexibility so that we're not levying another mill against our tax rates. And we're not transferring what we know we should be transferring for our asset management program for the vehicles that are at the end or approaching the end of their life. So we're trying to be as fiscally prudent as we can, and when we say that this is essentially a continuation of services rather than an expansion of services, that's a very true statement.
Other questions about the general fund?
I'll keep rolling if nobody else has any. Okay. I guess, could we just kind of have a discussion? I know, looking at neighborhood and community services, since 2024, you know, we had a chief building official. Now we do not. Everything is through GBA.
Yes.
I know for this seat at this table, would like to look at having a chief building official.
Mhm.
And obviously keeping GBA as the supplement, as kind of that escalation, as that tool that they are. But I think in talking to people, and I would love if any contractors and people who work with that department actively are listening, the feedback that I receive is people are frustrated that they need an answer in building.
Mhm.
And I really think, you know, similar to the buck stops with you, within that
Yeah.
department, we need somewhere, I think, that the buck.
We actually
Stops
had
when
a
it comes to that.
discussion on this yesterday regarding our review process. And I think one of the things that we identified was that a lot of what happens is people pop in and they'll ask someone who has some knowledge, but not detailed knowledge, particularly with respect to some of the engineering questions and some of the prescriptive allowances for deviations and variances that can occur. I think that that department has undergone a lot of change within the last 5 years. And very rapid change within the last 3. I know that within the past year or so, there's been some, I think, interpretation differences between former staff and GBA and even our city engineer and staff in other departments as well. And so I think some of that frustration is that when we are having these discussions that we have a more structured process, and certainly a process that I'm more familiar with and have a refinement, because I think that's something that we need to do. So we are looking at how do we better do that. In fact, even getting, because GBA knows their whole purpose is to essentially kind of evolve themselves out of a position to where they're essentially only doing really plan review for commercial.
Yeah.
Which is really what we want to have as an engineer, actually doing that more so than, someone who's taken a test, because a lot of the prescriptive amendments that allow for certain code exceptions do require some of that calculation, and even if you have someone who's certified, which, by the way, we would pay more than what we're paying GBA now.
Mhm.
They would still need to send it for review to an engineer who's passed that
Yeah.
certification. And we are looking at how is it that we look at this workflow, and how do we structure so that we can add that position back. So, yeah, we are hoping to evolve that here within the next year or two. And so by having our process and looking at that, we'll hope to be able to have a concrete answer as far as, okay, here is a realistic goal for when we know that can occur, so that we can also get more inspectors out into the field as well.
Is it the other contractual services here, 135,000 this year?
Yes, and we offset that with that salary savings from that chief building position, plus we currently have 2 vacancies. We are working with GBA and potentially another planning firm that has designed similar processes, so that we're having a review process that is more in-person based rather than email based, and also gives us the flexibility to I like to say work TS, but I'm afraid that sometimes if someone's new to that approach, they think then that must mean we're starting at no. And that's certainly not the case. We actually start at yes. And then if we start to run into some impediments, that what we're doing is identifying the various ways that they can work around that, so that we can. And both of those firms, and I know the prescriptive methods that we've undertaken previously came from GBA and work that they had done either on the behalf of, say, Kansas City, Kansas, or Kansas City, Missouri, or other, private as well, because that's the good thing we like with those contractors, is because they represent municipalities and private development, depending upon what that job is. And so they really can help us with that customer service ethos, and how do we look at it to be able to accommodate within the confines of the code that development actually occurring, rather than kind of starting at no and moving forward.
And then chief building official, if we hired one, that would cost more than the 140,000 we're budgeting.
Well, the 140,000 this year, yes, it would. And what we're paying this year is, again, for 2 firms to be able to come in and help us with our process and with our documents, so that we, with both internally and externally, are minimizing the number of contacts that we need and that we have, because something that can be done in person and face to face, I think really expedites that. It does require some forethought and scheduling ahead and getting the developer's engineer and, our engineer here. And then if it's something very specific, one of the things we've talked about and we are looking at bringing to you soon is how are we going to go ahead and start getting some, say you're building homes and that you're going to have 4 floor plans that you're essentially going to be doing. Then we'll have those pre-approved, so that when you submit your plan, you'll have, that listed as, say, 2024-1A.
That's what you were talking about, Eric.
So that it'll just
Yeah.
And that's what I've done in, previous jurisdictions is we've had, even had prescriptive allowances. So let's say it was a load bearing wall and you had a closet in one place on one side of the wall in a bedroom and a closet in another place on another side of the wall in the bedroom, and they wanted them kind of mirrored. Things like that, but when you start moving doors and moving, impacting potential load bearing stuff and creating big changes, that would be a problem. But I think initially, if we just started with, hey, what's the plan? And working it that way, I think that would be a big help. And I know that our current planner, who's very well qualified, is working on his ability and working with GBA to, get up to speed so that he can review and approve housing plans.
I like the idea of the CBO. I like having somebody in-house that knows what we want, our codes, and things like that. What I'm concerned about is that I don't want contractors to think that we get a CBO and they can just pop in anytime they want and ask a question. There's a lot of research that goes into those codes, certainly to get that answered correctly. Also, that CBO will have other, tasks that they need to be performing. So contractors listening need to understand that yes, it may be something that we're looking for and that position may be filled, but it doesn't give them the right to just call up or show up and say, hey, I need this answered now because I'm pouring concrete tomorrow or something like that. So, I always say this, if you go anywhere else, you don't call up Johnson County and get that answer. You don't, a lot of times that goes through a process so that, there's emails and replies and things like that. So it's documented so that if the answer is correct or incorrect, somebody can resort back to that and have proof. So I hesitate to say, hey, we're gonna get a CBO, that's gonna fix all of our problems, because it's not.
Yeah.
So.
But we are working, and we want to, within the next, 2 years, we would have that.
Along
if not
those,
sooner.
along those lines, on the contractual services for GBA, with the potential for proximity park, are we comfortable at the, this year our revised was 135. We're proposing next year 140. Are we comfortable at that number being able to fulfill potentially what their invoices may be for engineering relating to proximity park?
Yes, and we know too that, when that comes down the pipe, we also will be working with their design team at the forefront. And that's something that, yesterday, when we were having our process discussion, because where I came from, we had the city engineer and the utilities folks at the table, at least initially, if not at the pre-application, definitely immediately following the application. And ideally at both, because sometimes they may not be able to be there at the pre-application. But that's what we would be doing is having those folks here so that we would understand what that would be. And obviously the permitting and the administrative oversight would also be costs that would, depending upon what it is, could be offset with those fees.
The other side of that is, if we estimate too high, we're taking out budget authority that may otherwise be used for something else. We do have the Economic Development Fund that oftentimes on the engineering side is used for those upfront costs for some of those, especially on the commercial side, where they're more expensive. So we do have a couple of options there to be able to pay for it if it were to exceed what we budgeted.
Thank you.
On the cemetery services, we did increase the cost of lots, is that right?
We did on the revenue side. So in 25, you see basically those increases for just 3/4 of the year in your revenue projections, but the full increases in 26 and beyond.
And then on parks, I just had a quick question about the main restroom upgrade. Because, we're kind of sitting at tail half of July. We've got a lot of events coming up really soon. Are we looking kind of to postpone that, do those upgrades after those events, or?
The plan was to have them done prior to the events. I know that Drake's been working, trying to get some numbers together from contractors, and I don't know where that falls currently. Obviously, we're not gonna have mid-construction during the events, that we will plan around that. Still, the hope would be to get it done prior to, but
We'll see.
I know we're working on other people's time.
Yeah. Well, either way, that's exciting, because that's something that's definitely been needed there.
I appreciate your emphasis on pothole filling and maybe your asphalt. I know that was a good, that seemed to be a major issue this last year, and I'm glad we're putting more money to that, so, yeah, I agree.
Any other questions?
The one I, last time I say, I'm trying to find it right now, I can't find it. The total, everything, we're looking at 70 million plus. And we're going from 552, I think, million on the overall. It's just a minute here.
Oh, you're looking at the total.
I guess we have not there
Okay.
yet already.
That's okay.
When we get through that stuff.
Okay, we can certainly do that.
Any other questions on the general fund?
I guess the next one would be, I would just, kind of just a discussion on the fire department. I think I will say I've heard, and I think there's been conversations about if our fire department is fully staffed, what things could they respond to were a situation to arise? Maybe not even for this year, obviously, as we're allocating funds, but I certainly think, that public safety aspect of that, we really need to have a serious discussion on what does that look like? I know fire goes on, I think, almost every call for service from EMS. And potentially, if we don't have the bandwidth, do we need to go on every call? Is there a way we can change what that negotiation looks like to free up some time? Do we need more people on staff to ride in those trucks, responding to fires and stuff like that? I know we're playing a role in development of certain areas of town because of limitations of fire, and I am remiss to obviously not staff the fire department to where it would need to be. And obviously, they're the ones you hope they actually never fight a fire. You kind of hope they get to sit in the station all day, but in the real world, they don't. And so, at least like to look at what it would look like to be what we call fully staffed, to be able to effectively
Well, I
fight.
can tell you that right now, you could, if you were to ask me what would, and this is coming from a knuckle dragger, not a white shirt.
Yeah.
Just a guy that would run into the building. And the city manager, and I would tell you that you would want ideally 4 engines with 4 folks and vacation time and sick leave. And so if you have 4 on an engine, you would want at least 3 shifts. So you'd be adding 8 additional staff, 2 of which would be officers. One's a captain, one's a lieutenant. You'd be taking that times 3. Then you would need to add another captain. And at that point, you would need to probably look at going to a battalion chief type of system, which would mean you need to add 3 chiefs. And at least 2 floating firefighters for vacation, sick leave, etc. on top of that.
Sounds pretty expensive.
It is, because it's a when something happens, it's a labor intensive endeavor. And you can never really truly for a building fire or an industrial factory warehouse fire, you can never have enough people.
Do we have contracts with other municipalities? And
I'll let Chief talk about the mutual aid.
if they had a major issue?
Yes, Sean's online. I don't know if he wants to take it or if he wants me to take it. I don't wanna jump in on over the top of it.
I didn't realize, I'm sorry. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you out, Chief.
That's okay. Sorry, I'm out of state for military training, so happy to answer your question. So on mutual aid, what we're seeing across the country and then also in the county is there's a lower number of people that are willing to join the volunteer departments. We do have an automatic aid agreement with LOH, which directly surrounds Ottawa on all confirmed structure fires. So if we have one, they come into town, and if they have one, we go out and assist them. Everybody else, it's more of a mutual aid, traditional mutual aid. So they would have to request us if they needed assistance. And then it would be the same thing for us. If we needed more people, we would request them for mutual aid.
One thing we did do in the current year's budget, Chief, you might be able to talk about this a little bit more, but in this 25 budget, we had added back the ability for them to not have to lay off for certain hours due to the scheduling and how that worked out. And so they're now able to work those overtime hours with that funding, with that budget, and that allows them to keep more people on a shift at more times. And then in addition to, there was an funding for basically replacing or making sure that there was the additional staff available. Chief, can you talk a little bit more about how that impacted how many you're able to keep on for each shift?
Yeah, so with the additional position that we added last budget session, and then before, we have technically 2 floating firefighters. They're semi-assigned to a shift. So 2 shifts have 7 and 1 shift has 6. If needed for vacation, sick leave, stuff like that, we can rotate those 2 floaters over to another shift to at least bring them back up to 6. And we moved our minimum staffing from 4 up to 5. So it's definitely helped out with that aspect, having more people on duty during the day.
And that's 5 across both stations. So like 2 at one station, 3 at one.
Correct. If it's depending on how the shifts split between station 2 for EMS, occasionally we have 3 out there, but it all depends on how the makeup of EMS is for the day. So if they have like a female battalion chief, we can't really go into that room, but if it's a male one, then we can, and they are agreeable, we can have another one over there. I can guarantee 2 beds out there at that station. So, but yes, the additional staffing has helped increase our ability to have more people on scene initially.
And those funds continue through the
We
26 and beyond.
We budget 6,
6, okay.
so 3 person per 2 engines.
3, yeah, 3 for each.
So a lieutenant and 2 firefighters and a captain and 2 firefighters.
And thankfully we haven't, at least to my knowledge, run into situations where it's been a very, potential life safety issue having staffing. But I think I'd be remiss for all the, areas we look at that if we ever do need it, it will definitely be something to look back on the funds that we're kind of allocating towards that life safety. And so something I'd like to keep kind of on the books to kind of keep looking at and see what we might be able to do to get to those levels that are potentially a touch more effective if there were a fire of a scale that we pray never happens, but.
And we can also, because we don't currently have it, and Chief can speak to it in greater detail, but we don't have like a mandatory callback for oncoming shift or mandatory all hands if you have a working structure fire, because I know like smaller communities that have by professional I mean 24/7 staffing, that they often have the shift that's coming on the next day as a mandatory callback for a working structure fire, and we don't do that.
Mhm.
So.
So we have two options to try to get staffing to come in off duty. We have an active 911 app that tells us what's going on, gives us the calls type and everything. And then we also have Everbridge. So Everbridge would be like a second alarm type. If they receive that, then they know that they should, if available, can come in. But as city manager Silcott stated, we don't currently have a traditional callback at this time.
And Chief, do you or potential sir know when the last structure fire, I would say maybe not, that we lost a structure in Ottawa?
So that one's a little bit hard to answer. We don't have too many that, the whole house is damaged, but depending on what insurance wants to do, if they decide to total it, I would say the last one that we had was out on West Wilson. Stuart, do you remember the name? I'm drawing a blank right now.
Is that Wilson and? Yeah, it was the one they came back in and put a double wide in.
Mm-hmm.
Is that the address you're talking about?
No, this was commercial out there on West Wilson.
The trust company?
Or East Wilson, I mean. Yes.
Both.
21.
No, I think it was the trust company.
Yeah, that's correct.
Oh, yeah.
Which they built back, and they made enhancements to their fire suppression and everything there.
It's important to note, they were actually on rural water, and OFD relay pumped from the city and that's when they decided to come onto the city system rather than.
20.
So they were essentially like a quarter to half a mile away relaying engine to engine to pump that fire because of the inadequate fire flow in that distribution system, which is not designed for that. So it's not a fault of that system. It's just a 4-inch rubber gasket system.
Obviously, I think a lot larger discussion to figure out what that may look like, but I think at least in the future, kind of seeing some numbers, what, if we obviously 8 is a huge jump, but if we say that would be a goal by sometime in the future, we could at least maybe look at a roadmap over 10 years or what that may be to get there, because.
And one thing we can do is revisit the findings of the CPSM with the Center for Public Safety Management did regarding the department's strategic strategic plan. And I know Chief has a running spreadsheet on our status and priorities and where we're at for that. So we can revisit that here in the near future as part of our kind of strategic document review that we revisit from time to time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Others for general fund.
And then my last one on the police department, what UAS, I saw that we're replacing all the UAS because of the Kansas legislature passed a law that we can't purchase them from countries of concern. What a UAS is.
Drone.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Unmanned aerial surveillance. Okay.
Man.
The professionals in that realm don't like the term.
Drone, okay.
For whatever reason, technically descriptive, right?
Okay.
And both fire and police departments are working together in which of those need to be replaced first, and or whether that's too smaller, one of the larger. But they do know that over time they'll have to replace all of them because you won't be able to buy parts or anything to repair those as time goes on. So starting that process sooner than later. We will address those within the dollars that are available in the equipment reserve fund, along with all the other vehicles and equipment too.
Do you know, did that give it like a statute, or a date when everything needs to be retired by, or is it essentially you can't buy going forward? So if you have an existing one?
You can, my recollection, what it said, and a lot of people read it, that you can utilize what you have until it breaks. basically, and you can continue to buy a replacement part up to a certain date. But you can't procure like forms, you know, adversarial, the company manufacturers platforms
Yeah.
directly. And I wanna say it's like a couple of years, but that's right.
Okay.
It's a lot, so there's period there, and kind of let you utilize what you have until it basically fades out of existence. It's not no longer the practice, and then you are completely from directly replacing it at the same time. And it's has to be a American made device.
Thank you.
Depending on the size, it's a 3 or 4 year depreciation
Yeah.
timeline.
Any other questions on the general fund? Okay. That'll move us on to item 11C.
2026 budget, notice of indication of to exceed revenue neutral rate.
Under the requirements of the 2021 Senate Bill 13, the governing body must communicate their intent regarding the revenue neutral rate for the 2026 budget to Franklin County no later than July 20th. It is recommended the governing body vote to exceed the revenue neutral rate, setting the maximum mill rate and setting the public hearing date for September 3rd, 2025. And we have Director Landis.
Thank you. Okay, so this is just our timeline. Today is our final review of the initial budget information that you've received. This is also the time when we need to determine if you intend to exceed the revenue neutral rate. So what's been proposed to you is a mill rate that is more than the calculated revenue neutral rate. And then we would need to return the form to Franklin County. It also sets the date for your public hearing. Anything that, whatever number we return to them on this form is the number that you cannot exceed. Neither in your budget publication for the public hearing or in your approval when we get to the public or the adoption on September 3rd as well. So the two items that we are discussing is just what's been mentioned, the R&R and whether we intend to exceed, and then also directing publication of the public hearing. Just as a quick review, our total assessed valuation is 7.42% over last year. So it's roughly 156 million, which means that each one mil is the equivalent of $156,862. Oops. This is just another look at the information that City Manager Silcott was talking with you about earlier, which was the construction improvements, the new improvements and the change in value, which are important because as the city continues to grow and we continue to add more residential or more commercial properties, that change in value specific to that construction is our contribution to the overall assessed valuation. They're brand new dollars that have never been taxed before, right? So they're increasing your tax base. That assessed value increase over 24 was just under $11 million. The actual new improvements are just under $4 million. So about a $7 million difference between the newly added construction value and what the assessed valuation was. The difference in those numbers are the increase in assessed valuation for each property, whether it's residential or commercial, based on market value, appraisals, any of those items. This is our mill rate trend, and what's been proposed to you is that we keep a level mill rate of 44.643. That is split between the city and the library, although it's all considered city mill rates. So when you see it on a tax bill, it will say City of Ottawa. This is a level mill rate, and as you can see, we've really leveled out since 24, but we've been on a declining path all the way, since 2016, 2017.
And we've done factorizations and linear regression. I mean, we've eat it to try and make sure this in sales taxes that we're confident with what we're seeing as far as the data.
As a reminder, there's 4 funds that are mill rate supported funds, and I really just put these are everything you've just seen in the last couple of weeks. So I don't intend to cover them in detail, but it is the library fund, and they presented to you last week to talk about their budget. They are proposing an exact mill rate for 26 that we had in 25. As a reminder, they can go up to 10 mils based on charter ordinance, but it's currently sitting at 8.589. The debt service fund, the amount of property tax that supports our total debt is roughly 16.9%. And that is $452,685. That's exactly the property tax amount that supports that total debt of 16 million. The proposed rate there is slightly less than last year, simply because we do not need to keep in a larger reserve in this fund. We budget what we're going to pay for based off of what those proposed debt service calendars look like. So trying to make sure that we're not posing more property tax than needed in here. The OMA, which we discussed last week as well, we do have a similar tax rate. It's just slightly higher, very, very little higher than last year. But we did also defer a large majority of the expenditures in the OMA related to capital improvements, building maintenance, and any equipment have all been transferred out and as redirected. All those expenditures will appear elsewhere, largely in your general fund and your general fund supported capital improvement and equipment reserve. And then the general fund, which we just talked about, and this is a similar mill rate to last year and overall just supporting everything that we just discussed. The revenue neutral rate is the part of the legislation that was enacted a few years ago back now. And essentially what it says is that the revenue neutral rate represents a rate that you would be using, basically level property tax dollars from the previous year against your current year's valuation. So it produces a new mill rate. And it says that if you were to use your exact same amount of property tax dollars as last year, that's what your rate would turn out to be. So this year, we actually have a little bit of something I wanted to discuss with you. So our notification from the county says that our mill rate or our revenue neutral rate is 44.112. The calculation for that number is different than has been used in the past years. And their system, they have a new system, and the system calculates it in this manner. This manner is by using the total amount of tax dollars that are expected to come in. So essentially, I put an example up here. So if your total taxes collected in 2024 would be your property taxes as well as your delinquents and anything additional that came in that year, using it as a calculation base as opposed to the certified ad valorem taxes from the previous year. I don't want to get into too many calculation details, but if we were to calculate the exact same way as we have in the past years, our R&R would be 41.559. The difference between those is a $90,000 difference between the R&R that was provided and what we're proposing to you, or a $400,000 difference between the exact same calculation as previous years and what was provided to you. $400,000 is a lot different for us to try and get to. 90,000 would still be very difficult for us because we've already gone back and really gone through every division budget to see what we could take out just to get to the numbers that we've provided. What I did talk with the state says that whatever the number is that was provided by the county is what they will use. So we don't need to worry about them coming back and saying that, no, it would be different. There are other counties that are using this exact same methodology because they're using the exact same software. So it's not a miscalculation so much as a different calculation.
But Janet didn't mess up. It's a different way.
And I just wanted to bring it to your attention because I wanted to be able to show, the difference between the two. I wanted to make sure that we talked about the new way of calculating it is significantly different in impact, I guess.
The new way is allowable. Is that correct, or is that, we don't know?
The state says that the statute is exactly what I have there. The tax rate for the current tax year that would generate from the same property tax revenue is levied the previous year against the current year's total assessed valuation. So it would be that column where I have the 25 ad valorem, that's what was certified, the 6.5 million against the 156 that are million in assessed valuation, that produces the 41.559. That is the calculation per state statute.
But
As to what's allowable and what is the remainder of the story that will.
we determine later, but we can decide today whether we.
Right, so the amount that was certified to us was the 44.112, and that's the question that's in front of you, and when we complete the form, it will be if you intend to exceed the 44.112.
And it'd be, if we see it's only like a half a mil or.
Yeah.
It's not, if that, yeah. I
Yes.
gotcha.
Correct. This is the form that we would fill out. Again, it does ask you what you intend for that total mill rate to be. You can lower it, and when we get to the public hearing, if we have, further discussion and we needed to lower it, we could. You cannot go higher than what is and put on this form. So right now, it's proposed at a level mill rate, which is the 44.643. If you wanted to certify something higher than that, we would need to know from you today, and then also we need to know if you do intend to, in fact, exceed the 44.112, which was provided by the county. The rest of that conversation is the state, as well as any professional that works in the budget arena, will tell you the safest route possible is to intend to exceed the revenue neutral rate, and then also vote to exceed the revenue neutral rate at some point, regardless of what your actual rate ends up being. Because if the valuation changes, there's a lot of appeals, or there's something that's found that changes your final valuation in October, the penalties are such that the city would have to go back. Should that mill rate actually exceed this number, which you have zero control over at that future point, should it exceed, we will have to go back and pay penalty and go back and reimburse the citizens of Ottawa at each
the
individual address for the difference. There's a whole host of penalties that go along with it, so.
Didn't the school district have to do that?
I-
Yeah, but I think it's only happened once, because everyone, it's to use I know you like golf, to use a golf euphemism, it's, you gotta lay out cup.
I'll make a motion, we approve item 11C to exceed revenue neutral rate.
Do we have any further discussion? May I have roll call vote, please?
How do you vote, Commissioner Crowley?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Clayton?
Yes.
Commissioner Skidmore?
Yes.
Commissioner Tudor is absent. Mayor Allen?
And I vote yes, the motion carries for item 11C.
Thank you. The next item is simply directing us to publish the public hearing notice. It is a combined public hearing notice. This is the very small version of the page that was included in your packet. And I think I do want to circle back to Commissioner Skidmore's question about the total amount of authority for expenditures, but this right here is the actual notice. The top section tells you what the date and time is of the public hearing. It is a combined notice, but you will hold two public hearings, one for exceeding the R&R and one for the 26 budget. And then each one of those have an action item that would accompany those on September 3rd. But we would publish the full page, which is what was in the packet for the public, and this will accompany a packet of materials that will be available at City Hall for the public as well. Once this is published and once that intent form goes to the county, they'll distribute all of that information to every address, every property address in the city limits. Commissioner Skidmore, you had a question about the total number of dollars, and
Yeah.
so I wanna answer that, and I think you can see here, even without seeing all of the funds. So the very first column is your actuals for 2024 in the expenditure column. In the middle, it's for 2025, and it's what we expect to spend. So those are probably gonna be fairly similar, especially in some of these other special revenue funds. The third set of columns is for 2026, and if you recall, when we talked about all of our special revenue funds, our enterprise funds, I told you that when I presented to you the fund balances, I left out the undesignated stability outlay amounts so that you could see what the trend was for fund balance. But in order to give you the maximum budget authority for each of those funds, I added that fund balance back in. It becomes an quote unquote expenditure in amount only. It's not our intent to spend 100% of those expenditures, but should something arise that you don't have, that you didn't anticipate, you would need the budget authority without having to go through the entire public hearing process to be able to spend those dollars. And so budgeting your maximum budget authority is just a way to offer you the ability to spend those dollars should you need to. It's not that we intend to spend the full amount. So that's why that number is way higher than the previous years.
Just that we can, but most likely we will not.
Yes,
If people
correct.
ask, which that's what, yeah, we just completely went over the 60 million, I went, whoa, we went.
Yeah. Yeah,
All right, let's see.
yes.
All right, guys, thank you.
Other questions on this item?
Well, I will say on this, intro, that we're exceeding, this is the least amount we've ever proposed anyway, at $500,000. Normally it's been 4 or 5 mils, and so I have no problem with this. As long as they accept that number, I'll make a motion to approve item 11D on our agenda then.
I'll second.
Any further discussion? May I have roll call vote, please?
Do you vote Commissioner Taylor is absent, Commissioner Crowley,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Clayton,
Yes.
Commissioner Skidmore,
Yes.
and Mayor Allen.
And I vote yes, motion carries.
Thank you all for all of the time you've spent on this. The next time that we come back to you will be in September, unless you want to have further discussion. And if you have any questions and or concerns prior to then, what we will bring to you is the budgets that we have presented to you, unless there is something that you bring to our attention ahead of time. And those will be the dates in which we would be asked to approve a budget of some sort. So if you have additional questions and we need additional conversation, please let us know.
Would we be able to get essentially all of the budget related stuff that's been in the agenda packets put into one PDF and just dropped online?
Yes,
Just so if residents want to go look, it's one-stop shop, they can find it and just something to review. It'll be big, but.
it will
you know,
be
instead of
big.
Going through agenda after agenda.
We can do that. And my question would be to you, if there are any concerns with anything that are in there, or if you're intending to change any of that information later, we would have to update it. So if we were to change, or if you were to lower the, mill rate, it would change the ad valorem, it would change some of the expenditures. So we could put it out there as a draft.
That's a draft.
Yeah, I think-
That's what I was
And
gonna
then,
say, yeah.
and then we could put out a final afterwards.
Yeah.
It will take us probably a little bit of time to compile everything together,
And we
in that full book.
Mm.
but-
put it on a web page that's.
Yeah, and I wasn't thinking
Kinda
full
leading
budget
We have a
to-
budget.
even,
Yeah.
Mhm.
I
Yeah,
was,
Yeah.
just something initially before we'll kind of approve, people
Yeah.
kind of see
and
it.
for the public hearing, I think
Yeah.
people like to be able to see that, and we will have available that full state form, but sometimes I just think
The
it's.
cert pages are good.
Yeah.
But they're
Mhm.
standardized, uniformed.
Yeah.
Bigger picture.
And the new website will help because you can actually search and you don't have to go through every agenda to find what you're looking
Right.
for.
Absolutely.
But
Yes,
thank you.
thank you all so much, appreciate it.
We will move on to item 11E.
Ordinance rezoning 104 South Mulberry, 116 South Mulberry, and 124 South Mulberry from I1 light industrial to R1 low density residential zoning.
City Manager Silcott will present an ordinance for rezoning.
Commissioners, thank you for your time on this afternoon. This is a good, another good presentation. It shows that we're growing, that we have folks wanting to build within our community. Thank you, Gloria. Gloria distributed an agenda report that we had completed and was originally intended to be distributed, but I had noticed that I had left out I mislabeled the identifier as, so you would have had two second items, and for whatever reason, when I saved it over there, it didn't stick. So with that being said, we've distributed the agenda report for 124 South Mulberry. But what we'll present for you here today will be three properties. The first is 104 South Mulberry, the second's 116 South Mulberry, and the third will be 124 South Mulberry. The background, for the most part, will be identical, as will the analysis, which is the ordinance itself that's affecting this for the item under consideration, and then there'll be some subtleties within lot size and one non-conforming use. However, what we're asking for is consideration to change a current residential area that's zoned light industrial into a single family residential low density usage. So we're asking the city commission to consider the planning commission's recommendation following a public hearing to review the criteria as set forth within the statutes in our zoning code to adopt the proposed ordinance to rezone 104 South Mulberry from I1 light industrial to R1 low density. So the planning commission recommendation, which was a 6-0 with one seat extraterritorial being vacant, was to rezone from I1 to R1 for 104 South Mulberry. And that was also the planning department's recommendation to the planning commission as well.
Surprised me, it was once light industrial, is that?
Well, originally it was single family.
Yeah.
And then there was some industrial uses kind of around there for a period of time. And that occurrence was in the early 70s. And so, and it was, I think there was some like a construction and demolition landfill that may have been over in that area, and that requires some zoning amendments. And so what this is doing though is it's going back in, and you can see this would be First Street, and this would be Mulberry over here. And you can see that we have residential, single family residential and multifamily residential in the surrounding neighborhood. The applicant is Mr. Van de Venner of Van Eyck Homes, and he's requesting this for construction of a single family residence. It's a little under half an acre at 0.43. It's historically, again, residential in character and located within a mixed use area with zoning and development literally across the street. Request is consistent with our comprehensive plan land use, past rezoning actions, and meets our dimensional standards for a single family low density district, and is supported by all of our utilities, which you can see here with the green being sewer and the blue being our water mains, and then those red dots being hydrants and the black and white circles being valves.
It'll be about a 20,000 square foot lot. That's pretty good size for Van de Venner. Did he not request a lot split or anything else? Okay.
Not at this point that I'm aware of, and I don't know what his future plans are at this time.
Okay.
They did have a public hearing on June 26th, and they unanimously recommended approval based on staff findings and the statutory criteria. Included in your agenda report is the staff report to the planning commission, which is in significantly greater detail than our report to you, which is focused on the planning commission recommendation and your role in this process. The proposed ordinance enables this infill residential development on the parcel that's used historically for housing. It aligns with our comp plan. It rezones 104 South Mulberry from light industrial to low density residential single family, and updates our official zoning map accordingly, and would become effective upon publication, which we tentatively anticipate for July 24th. You can do several items. But just wanted to throw some financial considerations that ultimately what we're doing is expanding the tax base. Adding items onto the tax roll. The ordinance was drafted by City Attorney Finch and he approves this to form. So staff's recommendation would be to adopt the planning commission by approving the ordinance and authorizing the requested zoning change. That would be the motion if you so chose. You have three options. You can adopt the planning commission findings. That can be done with a simple majority a vote of 3 of the 5 present. You can reject or modify the planning commission's recommendations. However, you need to cite specifically the reasoning and rationale within the zoning or municipal code for your action and why it doesn't conform. And that requires 4 of 5. And you can also defer this for continued deliberation at a future meeting. Are there any questions on?
We can include all 3 addresses on one motion, I assume.
No, but we will fly through this
Okay,
going forward.
I'll take a motion that we accept this one on, what was it, 104, South Mulberry?
Second.
May I have a roll call vote, please?
How do you vote, Commissioner Skidmore?
Yes.
Commissioner Taylor is absent. Commissioner Crowley?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Clayton?
Yes.
And Mayor Allen?
And I vote yes. 104 South Mulberry passes.
Madam Mayor,
Commissioner,
I'll make the motion to approve item 11E for 116 South Mulberry as listed in the agenda.
Second.
do we have any further discussion about that
Question
one?
on that one, is that lot size, is it large enough?
Yes, it is, and it does meet our Article 21, Section 21-4 for the non-conforming use. It meets both subpoint B, which is about the historical usage and the parcel plat prior to that zoning, meaning it was in existence prior to the zoning that went industrial, as well as prior to our desire to take it back to its original form. And it also meets subparagraph D for purposes of development compliance in the application with building setbacks.
And the square feet, those concerning, but I guess it's adequate.
That's correct.
Okay, any further discussion on that one? May I have roll call vote, please?
How do you vote, Mayor Pro Tem Clayton?
Yes.
Commissioner Skidmore?
Yes.
Commissioner Taylor is absent. Commissioner Crowley?
Yes.
And Mayor Allen?
And I vote yes on 116 South Mulberry.
Our next item is consider a zoning change for 124 South Mulberry from I-1 light industrial to R1 low density single family residential. And it's more of the same in the same block. And it would be staff's recommendation to adopt the ordinance rezoning the property.
Do we have a motion for that one?
Madam Mayor,
Commissioner,
motion that we approve item 11E for 124 South Mulberry from light industrial to R1 low density residential.
do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Any further discussion on that one? May I have roll call vote, please?
How do you vote? Commissioner Taylor is absent. Commissioner Crowley?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Clayton?
Yes.
Commissioner Skidmore?
Yes.
And Mayor Allen?
And I vote yes, the motion carries. That'll take us to item 11F.
Request to renew water supply agreement with Rural Water District Number 4 of Franklin County.
This is to consider approval of the updated water supply agreement with the Rural Water District Number 4, Franklin County, to extend the existing agreement through 2036 as required for timely renewal. And we have Director Sneven.
Mayor, Commissioners, thank you for your time today. This agreement was drafted in 2016 by our city attorney Finch, and we've had a wonderful relationship with Rural Water 4. They are more towards our south and west portion of Franklin County, and they are one of our biggest users of our rural water districts. This agreement is a 10-year agreement, which was started in 2016, as I mentioned, that does not end until 2026, but they require, and we require a 12-month renewal or a 12-month notice. We have no issues with Rural Water 4. Again, like I said, we've had a great relationship with them. There are no major changes to this agreement. Basically just signatures, the resolution for our rates, and this absolutely has no effect on going forward, moving forward with any kind of a rate adjustment or anything like that in the future. It just has to be consistent with the other increases if we were do so within that 10-year time period.
We can adjust that rate as we go each year.
Yes.
At one time we got behind that, but now we're not necessarily making a lot of money on this, but we're not losing money, so. Right.
Correct. We can, as long as it's proportionate to, let's say, what we do for residentials or those increases. Basically, this agreement stops us from being able to, we're gonna increase you 85% and not everyone else, which we wouldn't do anyway. There's no change in the rate method, continued cost of recovery for treated water. The legal considerations, city attorney has reviewed this new document. Well, it's not a new document, it's the same one that he created in 2016 and is ready for us to move forward with it. So with that, I have, if you have any questions, I am here to answer.
I'll make the motion, we approve item 11F on our agenda.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Is there any further discussion? May I have roll call vote, please?
How do you vote, Mayor Pro Tem Clayton?
Yes.
Commissioner Skidmore?
Yes.
Commissioner Taylor is absent. Commissioner Crowley?
Yes.
And Mayor Allen?
And I vote yes, motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you. That'll move us on to comments by our city manager.
Honorable Mayor and Commissioners, we'll make this short and short and sweet. Water line construction there on Main Street should be completed by Friday, July 18th. Operational highlights, showing some work of our Public Works Department and pavement improvements. And you can see there concrete on South King Street, and they also did yeoman's work on 452 potholes in the southwest corner of southwest part of the town, and hauled 68.25 tons of rock to Orlis Cock ball fields for our ORC.
On that King Street, real quick, just briefly, how far north are they going, you know?
They'll do the repairs all the way to the stop sign.
By the McDonald's right
Yes.
through? A lot of people talk about, they thought King Street went all the way by home base, and that's a really bad area, that's.
No, that's a private.
That's
That's
private.
private. Okay, yeah, make sure I told my right answer, thanks.
And we have monthly and quarterly maintenance ongoing and repairing generators, breakers, and air inlet doors at our electric utility operations in our warehouse. Build out 381 parts across all of our operating departments, and they received a total of just under 6,000 parts that they had to process, classify, and store. I want to highlight upcoming Franklin County Fair. So on Friday, the 17th, we've got our ranch rodeo at 7 p.m. And at Friday, the 18th, we'll have Bulls and Broncs at 7 p.m. And as a former Attica rodeo mutton busting champion, I'm encouraging all of our young adolescents to get out there and ride some sheep if they're able. And I know Laura's grandson's looking forward to getting a big buckle on that as well. So we look forward to the Saturday, July 19th demolition derby and carnival rides, obviously each of these days from 6 to 11. And also encourage you to stop by. OPD will have a vendor tent out there that will be staffed sporadically throughout the event. So if you're out and about, feel free to stop by and thank our police department for the work that they do. Want to encourage folks to go out and hit our survey at ottawaks.gov/survey. And that's that 14-question survey. And we're include a brief section at the end for question 14 for additional comments beyond what we've actually asked. And to date, we've had 474 survey responses received, and that is obviously slight slowdown over what we initially had, but actually that's kind of par for the course when you look at these kinds of survey advances. They'll eventually straggle in to, you know, nothing eventually. So, but we want to just give everyone an opportunity to have their voice heard. And I want to, take this opportunity now to, point out, Misty, who is our new, communications, coordinator and director of outreach. So we're grateful for her being here, and she's, been a big assistance with this and taking, hard copy paper surveys around to some of our care homes and other facilities around town. And is, working with those institutions to pick them up when our survey window is closed. So thank you, Misty. We have current, openings. We only have two. We have a street department maintenance worker and we have a pro shop attendant at the golf course. So if you're interested, please fill out an application at ottawaks.gov, /employment. And I know, our crack HR team will be happy to assist you, in completing your applications and, look forward to onboarding new employees. And so we'll be presenting our monthly report here on, new employees soon. So with that, that concludes my report, and I'll turn it over to the commission if there are no questions for myself or another member of the team.
Just first up, I was gonna ask, the police teen safety academy started yesterday, I believe, and from Facebook, it looked like there was a really good turnout and stuff, and just wanted to.
So they're still doing it, and they're at range, I believe, doing some demonstration.
Awesome. Do you know how many students?
No. I don't remember offhand.
I could be wrong, but I was thinking the chief had said they were supposed to close it off at 12. A few others snuck in before the link was closed. So I think they started with 15. And then one didn't show up the first day, so they were at 14. And then the second day, someone hadn't come back that day, so they were at 13, which is right around what they were wanting. But I could be a little bit off on that, but I think that's what.
Like a pretty good success.
Yeah.
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 That's awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll move on to comments by the governing body. We'll start with Commissioner Crowley,
No,
Commissioner Skidmore,
I have nothing to do.
Mayor Pro Tem Clayton.
At this time.
And I have nothing as well, so we will move on to announcements. July 23rd, we have a city commission meeting here at City Hall at 4. July 30th meeting is tentative, I believe. And August 6th, we have a city commission meeting at 7 p.m. at City Hall. August 13th, city commission meeting 4 p.m. City Hall. August 20th, city commission meeting 10 a.m. City Hall. And seeing no other business before us, I will adjourn.